All right, it doesn't appear that we went live, so I'm gonna do this again.
Now we're live.
All right, we are live. Fantastic start to the podcast. That's Andy laughing in the background. Everyone, I just want to start off the podcast talking about the significance of the passage of time. Because when time passes, its significance. The time when it passes, the significance, and we just have to be unburdened by what's happened in the past and always look forward, not backwards, but always twirling with excitement over the now candidate Kamala Harris, although I don't think that's official. We're going to be talking about this absolute nightmare of a candidate and everything that she stands for and how the media is treating her and everything in between, because we're in Crazyville and news passes like I don't even know anymore because we're in Looney Tunes. So strap in, and we've got a lot to talk about in episode 458 of the In the Tank podcast.
Guys, do not listen to the In the Tank podcast. It is a dangerous show of dangerous men with some dangerous malarkey, and I do not stand for it. All right, where's my Vice President, Condoleezza Rice?
Welcome to the In the Tank podcast, folks. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. A little bit, my brain's a little short-wired today. The youngest one in my family is teething, not getting good sleep, which means I'm not getting good sleep. But I'm still probably more there than Joe Biden. But we'll get to all of that. We've got a couple of people joining us today. What do we got? We got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir? Oh, he is muted. So
muted again. Gosh, yeah, good start, Jim. Well done. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Did you guys see the address by the Orange Man last night? Not Trump, of course, but Biden. He had quite a bit of makeup caked on his face. Little known fact, I actually put a little makeup on before the show, because ordinarily my face, I look like Steve Buscemi, and so the makeup makes it so I look like Jim Lakely, which is nice. But we were promised last night that Biden was going to explain why he was withdrawing from the race, right? He didn't do that. And it's because he was pushed out, didn't want to say he was pushed out. And, because this was not his choice. He said he's handing the torch to a new generation because he was forced to do that. That was a hostage video, guys. That was not and a swan song for a 50 years politician. So it sounded to me like the final speech for a politician that's on death row. But the good news is he even got ice cream in the Rose Garden for his final meal. As you mentioned, Donnie, these are the strangest politics I think any living American has ever seen. And we got a long way to go.
Yeah. I want to actually start with that, but I also have to introduce Chris Talgo, editorial director here at the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
I'm definitely doing better than Joe Biden right now. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, well, maybe he's, he might be getting ready to play, 6 handicap golf round here, Chris. So he might be doing well.
I think the odds of that are literally impossible. Put a zero on that. 6-0 maybe.
Yeah, so we're gonna be talking about a lot of the latest news, obviously. What was likely to be the candidates, and I know it's not official yet, Kamala Harris, the media's reaction to it, and kind of get into just how radical she is. Because, like when a vice president, they kind of just sit in the background. They don't really do too much. It's very easy to just ignore them. But now she's just being forced right into all of our faces. So we have to ask the question about what we should know about Kamala Harris. So we're going to get into all of that. But before we do, I have that message I put out there at the beginning of all of these podcasts, which is first, For those audio-only listeners that might be catching the show on a Friday or later, first off, why don't you leave a review for us? That'd be greatly appreciated on iTunes. And consider joining us a day earlier, Thursdays at noon Central Time, where we are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and X. And you can join in the conversation, throw your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll show your comment on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. You could also help out the show by doing a couple of things. If you're watching on YouTube, we are demonetized. So if you want to support the show financially, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate directly to the show. This is actually a better way of donating because this way YouTube doesn't take 30% of your donations. If you want to support the show but don't want to spend a penny, but might want to spend a couple of seconds, you could hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, share this content, hit that like button, or just leave a comment under the video. All those things help break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. I just saw a thumbs up pop up. Someone was listening to me. But like I said, we have a lot to talk about, but you know, sometimes when Thursday starts rolling around, we're like, what should we talk about? I don't know. There's not too much going on. Maybe we'll talk about this or that. I don't know. We haven't been short of topics lately, folks. It feels like this is the most unbelievable, crazy political cycle that I've been alive for. I mean, I don't know, Jim, maybe there's some other historical ones that kind of outshine this, but in just the last several months, we've got like Trump facing dozens of charges, felony charges. Trump convicted on some of these charges. That was late May of this year. The historic, now it's probably going to go down in some history books, the Trump versus Biden debate, which was just absolutely crazy. That happened in late June. That resulted in waves of calls for Biden to step down, or at least, pull out of running for, election or whatever, from the New York Times, basically most of the mainstream media, sitting congressmen, influentials, political commentators, everyone calling for him to come out. I don't remember the last time something like that's ever happened. A failed assassination attempt against Donald Trump that happened just, a couple weeks ago, and a successful political assassination of Biden, which just finished off on Sunday, I think, officially. So, Jim, am I wrong? Is this the craziest cycle that's happened in this past at least century?
Yes, without any doubt. And I had forgotten about it's how crazy it is. It's so crazy that the fact that Donald Trump is a convicted felon on trumped up charges that it was obviously political lawfare to get him out of the race is completely forgotten. I had completely forgotten about all of that.
Right.
And we had talked about it several times because so much has happened since then. It's really remarkable. And like I said, we still have, 1, 2, 3, we got 3.5 months to go and until election day, and a lot can change and a lot of other more crazy things can happen between now and then. But, the reason Joe Biden is being shoved out of his own reelection campaign, which is pretty remarkable, because just 4 years ago, he collected the most votes for president of anyone in American history, way more than Obama, way more than Hillary. And 3.5 years later, he is unelectable, according to the leaders of his own party. So take that as you might and apply it to the results of the 2020 election and the effectiveness of Biden's first term here. But it is, as I said, I watched that last night. It looked like a hostage video. He had so much orange makeup on his face. People were saying on Twitter that it looked like he had a bruise on his jaw. And if you look at it, it does look discolored there compared to other places on his face. Joe Biden was unseen by anybody in the public or the press for, I think it was 8 straight days. I think the last time he was seen, he was gingerly walking down the steps of the kids' stairs on Air Force One. That was July 17th. Nobody had seen him at all until yesterday, or the day before yesterday, when he returned from recovering, supposedly, we're told, from COVID at his Rehoboth Beach, Delaware mansion vacation home. And then we saw him again last night. And it's just remarkable that a president can basically be unseen, unheard. People were joking that we needed proof of life. I mean, I suppose we finally got it yesterday. But I can't remember any time in my entire lifetime, I'm 53 years old, where nobody had spoken to the president. The president had not shown his face in public for such a long period of time, unless there was a serious health issue going on. Obviously nobody saw Woodrow Wilson after he had a stroke. Very few did. But I just found it remarkable that like the Speaker of the House could have just gone to the White House or contacted the White House staff and said, I am the Speaker of the House. I am the leader of 1/3 of our federal government. And I demand to see Joe Biden right now. I want to go see him right now. That never happened. It was really weird that it didn't. And this is a White House that has lied about Joe Biden's mental and physical condition for the entirety from the campaign, from the 2020 campaign forward, where there is not a single quote unquote official fact from the White House about Joe Biden's health that you can trust is true. That is why, the media finally caught on to this, and people who listen to this podcast and don't depend on CNN and MSNBC for their news knew that something very odd and strange was going on. One of our viewers here, I'll throw it over to Chris, but one of our viewers here said that what's been going on the last couple of weeks almost makes them feel sorry for Joe Biden. I don't. I don't because we have the White House has been lying to us to our face his entire presidency, and the media has been gaslighting us about the real condition of Joe Biden for his entire presidency. I find it hard to find empathy in my heart when those are the two things that have been dominating our media and our politics for the last 3 years.
Yeah, I know that there was like some talk about questioning whether or not this Joe Biden was still alive. I didn't buy into that. I was wondering if he was hiding, like a black eye, like a Harry Reid style black eye or something like that, because they, convinced him to step down. But, that's just my own theory. Chris, I do want to talk about Biden and the latest developments in that, of course. But I mean, just to heap on more like national stories, global stories that have happened just in like recent past, it seems like we've gone through a couple of decades worth of history in just the past 4 years. So I mean, starting in like 2020, we've had the pandemic, global economic shutdown. We were all confined to our homes, mask mandates, social distancing mandates, vaccine mandates, shortages of bottled water, shortages of toilet paper, shortages of diapers, shortages of baby formula, disruptions in supply routes. Remember when all those ships were like waiting to dock off like our main, harbors or whatever on the East Coast and West Coast? We had the George Floyd riots nationwide. We had the riot at the U.S. Capitol, massive inflation, war with Russia, war in Israel, the Baltimore Bridge collapse. We had those string of train derailments. We had forest fires in Canada that blanketed the entire United States with smoke. What is going on here, Chris? Can we hold it together for a few more years?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to focus on just the past month, and you guys both already said this, but just want to repeat very briefly. So over the past month, we've had probably the most impactful presidential debate in all of history. We had an assassination attempt on a former president that has not happened in decades, and then we have the president bow out of the race literally at the last minute. I mean, that is in and of itself unprecedented. I was watching Fox News broadcast last night of the speech, and Brit Hume, who is a very astute political commentator and has been around Washington, D.C. for longer than I've actually been alive, he said, and I take this pretty seriously, that this has been the most tumultuous month politically in the entire history of the country. And I agree with that.
Yeah,
I do. Yep.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So yeah, obviously the news is Joe Biden broke up with us via a tweet. He sent some letter that was, auto signed, not even on letterhead, just put it out there on Twitter, and we all just had to accept it, that he was stepping down. He's for the good of the country, the good of the party. I'm withdrawing from the election or something like that. And what's crazy about that is, what we've talked about over the last couple of weeks on this podcast is this divide between, the rest of the Democrats and kind of the small circle around Joe Biden about whether all these people trying to push him out and him kind of stubbornly saying, no, I'm not getting out. And I just saw a video on Twitter that was kind of comparing his remarks that he gave yesterday to remarks that he made at I think the NAACP conference or something like that. Some conference that he was at 10 days prior, where he was just like, oh, they want me to get out, but guess what? I'm not. I'm staying in and we're going to win this race. And it's just like, how did his feelings about these things shift so radically in such a short amount of time?
It's way worse than that. The day that he dropped out of the race with that tweet at 1:15 p.m. or 1:15 p.m. Yes. That morning on these Sunday shows, his campaign advisors were out saying that he's in this to win it, that he's staying in. So we're talking literally maybe 90 minutes or so.
Sure.
And apparently what happened is that he had a radical, change of his mind at the very last second. And this was, literally to the second. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. There was probably some pressure being applied by Pelosi and company. There's, we can speculate on that all day long. I don't really think that really adds much to the conversation. I think it's much more interesting to speculate on whether or not Kamala Harris will remain their candidate. Because really, I think right now what you've got happening is there's going to be a couple of weeks where they're going to look at the polls, and the initial polls that have come out do not look good for Kamala, especially in those swing states.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think that they are between a very, in a very difficult position, because if they were to say, okay, we don't think Kamala Harris can win, so now we're going to go with someone else, it's like, wait a second, what? I think that would be catastrophic for the Democrat Party, because they have made their entire, political agenda based upon identity politics. So they now have to live with that. But I also think, and this is obvious, I'm not breaking any news here, their number one concern is making sure that Donald Trump does not win.
Sure.
Okay. So it's not that they're excited about Kamala's agenda and about her, policies. They aren't. I've been watching the news networks over the past couple of days, and really all they're talking about is how energetic she is, how much energy she's. Yeah, no, seriously, they're not talking about the policies that she's proposing, or the policies that she's supported in the past, or the policies that she's supported as vice president. They want nothing to do with that. They want to completely ignore that. So really, all they're really banking on the fact that she's energetic, she's young, she's exciting, and that in and of itself will convince voters to vote for her. And I think that is a losing proposition. And I think that they're going to get a gut punch very soon. And I think it's also very interesting that Barack Obama has not made it clear where he stands yet. I think that he's just kind of waiting in the wings, kind of waiting in the shadows, like, I kind of want to see, where this is. Barack Obama never came out and also said that Joe Biden had to go. Barack Obama is way more, he's not going to be that upfront about it. So I think that really what he's doing, and I think that he is the one pulling the strings, and him and his collection of former members of his administration, I think that they're the ones who are really going to determine this. And it's so ironic for the party who has been lecturing the American people about democracy and saving democracy. Joe Biden also mentioned the word democracy 6 times last night in his 12-minute speech.
Sure.
So how can they run on a platform of, we are the pro-democracy, we are the party that wants to maintain these democratic principles, when we kicked out the guy that had 14.5 million primary votes. We also, and let's remember, this is not a new phenomenon for the Democrats. In 2016, they basically kicked Bernie off, and said, we're just going to make Hillary our candidate. Okay. 2020, what did they do? They rigged the primary season so that Joe Biden would win. And then in 2024, what did they do again? They rigged it again. They put South Carolina first, because they knew that Joe Biden would South Carolina. And once he won South Carolina, it probably would be a fait accompli. The Democrat Party wants us to believe that they are the party of the voters and these democratic principles, but they're not. They're the party of win at all costs, ends justify the means. Trump is their, their just boogeyman. And I think the American people aren't buying this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that they're trying to kind of play up Kamala Harris's ability to move, considering that she's replacing a guy that's like the first time you see the Tin Man in Wizard of Oz, just oil can. That doesn't surprise me too much, but I mean, Jim, let's stay on Joe Biden just for a little bit longer, because this idea. Everyone was calling for, his political head, saying that he was just like mentally unfit. He just wasn't cognitively there. His cognitive decline. Like, that's the reason why they wanted him out. That's what was on full display during the debate, right? That's what gave all of these people all of the ammunition to come out and say, like, yeah, we need to get this guy out of here. So why is it that he is mentally unfit to run for president, yet he's still mentally fit enough to be president for the next couple of months? Doesn't that seem a little hypocritical? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the simplest answer is that he's not actually president, that he is not making any decisions at all, except apparently for whatever flavor ice cream they're going to have in the Rose Garden when he unceremoniously and humiliatingly ends his long and distinguished only by what of a piece of work and a horrible human being he has been for most of his 50 years. He started his political career. His entire political career, again, so we're going to get gaslit again, right? We're going to be told that Joe Biden, well, first of all, let me go back, because I was thinking about this when you guys were talking earlier. It was just weeks ago that Karine Jean-Pierre from the lectern in the White House briefing room was telling us, hey guys, seriously, Joe Biden is so active, we can hardly keep up with him.
Right.
He's so active. Oh my gosh. So the idea is, painting the lie in people's face, in their minds, that here you got, young, fit 30-year-olds who could barely keep up with the president that we see shuffling around, like an old mob boss trying to pretend he's nuts.
After he gets up from his afternoon nap, he does have a boost of energy, just to be fair.
Yeah, right. And so, look, and then now we're going to be gaslit to say that Joe Biden, and it started right away, like starting on Sunday when the political axe finally fell, that they were saying, Joe Biden, he's such a good man. He's such an honorable man who's putting country in front of his own ambitions. It's like, that is BS. Joe Biden has been a nasty piece of work from the beginning of his political life. He's still to this day lies about the traffic accident that took the life of his wife and one of his children. To this day, he still says that she was killed by a guy who drank his lunch, a drunk driver who slammed into and killed his wife. That is completely false and untrue. And he says it all the time. So the family and that man who were involved in that accident have the president of the United States lying about them, saying that it was a drunk driving accident when it was not. And I could go through, I don't want to talk about Joe Biden very much anymore. We could go through many, many other examples of what a nasty piece of work and not honorable man at all Joe Biden has been for the entirety of his public life. But here we have, your question was, if Biden is not well enough to run for re-election, he's obviously not well enough to serve as president of the United States. And as I said, he's not really the president of the United States. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist. You just have to use your eyes and ears. The idea that he is a man in command, that he's running the country from behind the Resolute desk is absolutely absurd. Everybody knows that it's the former Clinton apparatchiks, former Biden, say it again, former Obama apparatchiks in the background that are running everything, that are running foreign policy, that are on the phone, that are, at the Pentagon, that are running all of these agencies. Joe Biden doesn't have anything to do with this. Everybody knows that. If there is a Biden that is actually running the country, number one candidate is Jill Biden, and number two candidate is convicted felon Hunter Biden. The idea that Joe Biden is running this country is crazy. But the reason it was important to bring up that departure speech from last night, in which Joe Biden supposedly himself promised to explain to the American people why he was getting out of the race. He did not explain why he was getting out of the race. And the media, actually, and the Democrats will actually not tell you why he's getting out of the race. He's getting out of the race because he is not mentally fit to run a campaign and to serve another 4 years. But they keep skipping over that part.
I disagree.
They just say that he's not electable anymore, and that's why he's getting out. So it's actually
because he's losing to Trump.
Reason. It's the most cynical reason that he's getting out of the race. His own party thinks he's not electable. What they do not finish the thought with is say, why is he not electable? He's not electable because he's a senile, doddering, physically and mentally unwell person. And the American people saw that on June 27th during that debate. And so we're just going to skip over all of that and just get right on to young, vibrant, dancing, happy Kamala to take the reins. So, okay, great. Let's do that. But I'm not going to forget how this all got set up. And the American people actually aren't either.
Chris,
I kind of disagree with that. I think the reason why he was pushed out of the race was because the polls showed that he wasn't going to beat Trump, and the Democrats, all they care about is beating Trump. And I think that, his energy and all that stuff, that's playing second fiddle. Really what's going on here is the American people are not in line with his policies,
right?
Especially on the economy, especially on the border security issue. So it's going to be very interesting to see how is Kamala Harris, who was put in charge of the border and who was even more left than Joe on many of these issues, from the economy to healthcare to the climate to environment and energy and all that stuff. She's more left than him. So how are they going to try to pivot her as a moderate? Because if the Democrats have any chance of winning, they're going to have to win over moderate voters. And really, I think that what they've done now is they've put forth a candidate, and I'm not even sure. I do not think that Kamala Harris is guaranteed to be the candidate right now. I think that
I want to have that conversation because I think that is kind of prepping for this, especially. Let's just get into this part of it because afterwards, after Biden came out with his breakup letter via Twitter, everyone's like, "Oh wait, he didn't endorse Kamala Harris there. That's interesting." And then like 20 minutes later, he put out another tweet saying, "Oh, I endorse Kamala Harris." And then like a handful of other people came out saying, yeah, she's great. We're going to endorse her. So just like kind of quickly, the news moved on from Biden dropping out to Kamala's our next person, and she's great.
But that doesn't matter until the delegates make the final choice.
Agreed. And I do want to have that conversation. But I just want to kind of talk about just the media's reception to this and how then like kind of getting in line to just like boost her. They all of a sudden became like a booster club for Kamala Harris. So I just want to like right off the bat, just kind of address this narrative that Democrats are excited for Kamala Harris. Like I get it. They could be excited that they don't have to pretend to be excited for Joe Biden. Like maybe that in itself is exciting. But I mean, it's just, we know that Kamala Harris isn't popular. We know that, right? I mean, she just ran for president 4 years ago. Wasn't that long ago. And she ended up from the race before the primaries even started. So, and if you recall, that was one of those kind of a cluster of a race where there was like 25 people running. I think we even did a death pool for that. Remember, Jim? So if you want to look at it in one way of all the people that stayed in the race and got votes and electoral votes and break it down by popular vote, this is who Kamala Harris lost to in the 2020 primaries. Okay. She lost to Joe Biden. She lost to Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, Elizabeth Warren, Michael Bloomberg, Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Tom Steyer, Devil Patrick, Michael Bennett, Andrew Yang, John Delaney, Cory Booker, Marianne Williamson, Julian Castro, and Joe Sistak. Okay, she lost to all of those people. At the end of the whole thing, she ended up getting 844 votes throughout the whole primary. So she is like the 25th most popular Democrat. Nobody's excited for her. All of this, like, oh, we're so excited, is just like because they don't have to do Joe Biden anymore or fake. So
see, I'm coming at this from a different angle. I think I'm looking at this through the context of what happened at the Republican National Convention. There were, I mean, I've been watching these national conventions and following politics for 25 years now, and I've never seen the Republican Party as unified as it is right now. This is unheard of territory for the Republican Party. For the past 25 years, the Republican Party has been the one that's always had these like inner conflicts, establishment versus populism, blah 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 blah. It looks like the Republican Party, and I think the assassination attempt on Trump actually helped coalesce that. Now I say we because I tend to vote Republican. The Republican Party is unified more than ever on a policy agenda and on many other things. The Democrats, on the other hand, are for the first time in my following of politics are in disarray. And I think that what they realized was they had to stop that chaos as quickly as possible. Because I was watching CNN and MSNBC and following the stuff on the internet and all this stuff, and you had so many different, people wanting so many different things, and I think that they were saying, well, what is the easiest way for us to just, finally like pretend to unify? Well, next in line, Kamala Harris, and she, I think is temporarily that they are temporarily coalescing around her, but I don't think that it's like, I don't think that they truly think that Kamala Harris is the best candidate. I don't think they believe that her policies are the best policies. I don't think that they believe she would make the best commander in chief. But I think that what they're doing is they're saying we had to stop the bleeding and we had to stop all this internecine warfare. We had to stop all that immediately and try to appear to the American public as, hey, don't worry, everything's all good here in the Democrat Party. We're all on the same on the same page here. But really, they're not. And I think that you're going to start to see that as the polls start to come out and different elements of the Democrat Party, different factions start to say, what are we doing? We're going to lose now even more than we would have had we stuck with Joe Biden. And once again, I go back to this has nothing to do with politics. It's nothing to do with the future of America or, preserving this, great nation for generations to come. It's about political power. And the Democratic Party in particular, I'm not saying the Republican Party it does not care about political power. Of course they do. But the Democrat Party really cares about political power. I mean, that is like their entire reason for being. And I mean, I've noticed that for years, how when a Republican candidate wins, my Democrat friends and family members go apoplectic. However, when Joe Biden wins, I'm just kind of like shrug it off like, man, this is kind of, not great. But it just goes to show how much emphasis they put on government and the state and, like just the federal, bureaucracy and how much they entrusted and how afraid they are that someone like Donald Trump, who is an existential threat to the Washington establishment, how much they are afraid that he's going to come in and make some real everlasting changes. And I think that is what this is all about.
Chris, so I will admit, coming into this episode, I was just kind of assuming that Kamala Harris is going to be their candidate. I think you've said a couple of things that made me like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be quite as confident about that. But where exactly do you stand? Like if you were putting money on it, are you putting money that it's going to be Kamala Harris, come election time? Or do you think something's going to happen during the convention and somebody else is going to come out on that ballot?
I mean, it's hard to predict. I think what the initial polls are showing is not good, and I think there's already some whispers that, hey, well, at the very least, we've got to get a really moderate guy on there to be her VP candidate. But I don't think people are going to vote for that ticket based on who the VP candidate is. But they're going to vote on Kamala Harris. They're going to vote because Kamala Harris is not only tied to the Biden policies, but her policies before Biden were even more radical. And you know what? There's videotape of all this stuff. And the Trump team and the Trump campaign is already putting forth ads that shows all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, hey, guys, trust me on this. Kamala Harris wants to take away your private health care. She said it in a CNN town hall debate a couple of years ago.
Sure.
Whether it's that or just like all the, crazy policies that she's, been supporting over these past few years. And I also think that, right now, everyone's in a kumbaya moment on the Democrat side in the mainstream media because you know why? Kamala Harris is standing in front of a teleprompter and just saying the words on the screen. It's so easy for her to do that. But I've seen Kamala Harris in interviews and I've seen Kamala Harris in debates, and that's when the real Kamala Harris comes out.
Sure.
And once she's on the debate stage with Donald Trump, and once she is, in front of voters having to ask, answer questions in town halls and stuff like that, I think the American public is going to get the real understanding of, wow, this woman she has no business even being close to the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think, and I know I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here. I think that the reason why Joe Biden picked her in the first place is because she was the best insurance policy for him. Because I think that he knew, and I strongly believe this.
I've heard other people say this exact thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, that he knew by picking her, it would be an insurance policy for him to remain on the ticket even in 2024, because the refrain would always be, "You sure you want her to replace me?" And I think that somehow, some way that that didn't work out for him. But I don't think that Kamala Harris is 100% going to be their candidate, come the Democrat National Convention in Chicago in about a month.
Okay, not 100%. I'm not going to let you off the hook, though. Would you still?
I'm going 50-50. I mean, yeah.
Okay, that's fine enough for me.
Yeah.
Jim, any comments on that? Is this are we assuming too quickly that she's going to be the candidate, focusing our time on talking about her policies, which we're going to get to very soon?
Yes. And this is good. This will be the last we should say until we get into the policy stuff. But, I think I was going to say a little less than 50-50 that she'll even be the nominee coming out of that convention in Chicago. And it is going to be a spectacular convention here in Chicago. There's going to be chaos on the streets, and there's going to be chaos in the hall. It's not something to be missed. I will not be going there physically, because I value my life and and having all my bones not broken. But look, even again, the reason why she was put on the ticket, that Biden was bumped aside and she was, to grab the standard bearer and run forward, is because she is allegedly more electable than Joe Biden against Donald Trump. Mind you, Biden kept insisting, I'm the only one who has beaten Trump. I'm the only one who can beat Trump in November. And the party decided that isn't true. But, our friends at Rasmussen Reports, who we've done a lot of polling with over the last 12 months or so, and we have a lot of great new polls that I don't know if we'll talk about them on this podcast, but should pretty soon. They just released a poll today, a national poll, preference either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris for president. Trump is leading 50-43, 7 points. That's a big gap in a supposedly 50-50 country. MSNBC held a focus group of Wisconsin women voters the other day, and their viewers must have been horrified by what they heard that focus group say to the MSNBC person. And we have a clip of that we'll show in a little while. Kamala Harris was listed by the GovTrack website as the most liberal senator of them all. That is not an easy thing to pull off, but she managed to do it. And she also missed, I think, 62% of all the votes in the Senate while she was a senator, which I believe also led all of the senators, all of the 100 senators in the United States. Her White House staff, and this tracks with the way here it was when she was a senator, has a 92% turnover rate, which again is pretty remarkable, even in a town where bosses notoriously treat all of their staff like garbage. And then yesterday, in one of her only public speaking events as vice president, and then also the presumptive Democratic nominee, she lauded America's vital allyship with North Korea instead of South Korea. So no, I don't think it's actually a done deal that she's the nominee. I think she claims that she doesn't want it handed to her. She wants to earn it. If that's the case, what she's doing so far to earn it is not really is falling pretty flat. And I think if the Democrats really are, we have to save democracy to keep Trump out of the White House, they could very well decide in a couple of weeks at the convention here in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention that she's not gonna be able to beat Trump either, and they may have to pull a third emergency parachute to get so they don't crash into the ground. We will see, but I think it's a little less than a 50-50 chance that she'll be pulled and that they'll go to somebody else, because really, who else is there?
Right. Yeah. The GovTrack thing, I wanted to bring that up. You mentioned it. So is that what it's called? GovTrack?
GovTrack, yes. And they erased it from their website.
Yeah, so they apparently what they part of the things that they do, they're like some nonpartisan nonprofit group or something like that. One of the things that they would do is they would go through and like rank different sitting senators based on their kind of political leanings or something like that. And in
Particularly
2019,
on their voting record, what they voted for.
right. And in 2019, Kamala Harris, GovTrack, came out and said that she was the most liberal sitting senator. Out of all 100 of them, she was the most. And for whatever reason, after everyone's coalescing with Kamala Harris and saying she's so great, oh man, she's so good, they deleted that. They tried to quietly delete that. So that's kind of interesting, especially considering that Biden was largely selected in 2020 to be the candidate because he was seen as being a little bit more moderate than the Elizabeth Warrens and the Bernie Sanders that he was running against. So I find that to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, but I mean that's just a tip of the iceberg. The mainstream media has also tried to come out and say she was never declared border czar. So I mean, come on, this is gonna happen. The mainstream media is going to do everything they can to try to make it look like she is the second coming. I've even heard some of them say this reminds me of 2008 with Barack Obama and all this stuff. I mean, seriously, like they're getting chills, down their leg again.
No,
Chris
Matthews, right?
It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Exactly. It's not going to work.
The people are awake now. They are awake to what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, so we could probably spend another hour just playing clips of her messing up in speeches and saying, the idea that we have an alliance with North Korea, or remember that one time when she was like talking about climate change and she said how we need to reduce population. We all know that she probably meant to say pollution, but whatever, a little Freudian slip there. Or, her like really just great speeches about space and, her explanations about how Russia's a big country and Ukraine's a smaller country, or her like her great speech about artificial intelligence or AI. It's two letters. One's artificial, the other one's intelligence. So like we could play a million of those clips, but we're not, because to save you people from having to listen to her unnecessarily. But when people do see her speak, their reactions are very much like ours. They're kind of questioning her grasp on some of these issues and stuff. So, Jim, you mentioned, I haven't seen this clip, but you mentioned going to a what is this, like a test group, a viewing group or whatever it's called.
A focus group of Wisconsin women voters. Yes.
All right. So let's go ahead and play this. So this is after they had listened to her speech or something like that. And then they went back and asked these people in this focus group, what do you think about Kamala Harris?
How do you perceive Vice President Harris compared to President Biden in terms of competency and experience?
I think she's worse. She doesn't even know what's going on at the border.
Right.
And that's what she was supposed to be doing and in charge of. I mean, as a school teacher, if I did not do what I was supposed to be doing, you better believe my job would be in jeopardy. Well, it isn't. Not only was her job not in jeopardy, she was just handed a promotion.
Is there anyone that Kamala Harris could appoint as her vice president that you would find reassuring? Would make you consider voting for her?
No. Never consider voting for her. No. I would do RFK Jr. way before her.
Yeah, same. Absolutely.
Yeah. And she's not the first woman to run for the presidency, Hillary Clinton. I'm assuming no one voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. So it's not necessarily going to sway you to vote for a woman in office. When do you think America will have a female president?
When there's a competent one.
I don't get a good feel for her.
I think she's an idiot.
Right.
Mary, why do you think that she's not that bright?
Because she hasn't done anything in the time that she's had. We don't know anything about her as far as her 3 years so far in the White House. She's not real smart.
Why do you think she's not that bright? No, I didn't say she wasn't bright. I said she was an idiot.
Yeah, but you know what's so telling from that is that that MSNBC reporter was trying to make it all about personality. And that's what the media is trying to do. They're trying to make this all about Donald Trump. But you know what? The American people are going to make this about policy. I strongly believe that. this election, unlike some of our past elections, is going to be about policy. Because right now, the American people are suffering immensely, whether it's the economy, the border, afraid of, foreign conflicts and, American weakness abroad, violent crime in the cities, especially. I mean, there's a whole bunch of issues that are really, I think, going to play to Donald Trump's and JD Vance's strength. And they're going to really, pull Kamala Harris and whoever if she is, the candidate, and whoever else she, plans to run with, because they can't run on that record because they are the ones. And Kamala Harris, I mean, she's really stuck here. How can she say, hey, wait a second, I was put in charge of the border, but all the border stuff has nothing to do with me? Or, hey, the entire Biden presidency and all of the spending, which I have been, in full favor of, I'm just going to walk away from that now. She can't do that. So if anything, I think, if she's going to go even more left, she's just going to double down and say, we didn't do enough. And I mean, if she goes down that road, wow, I think it's going to just be a total meltdown for her. But I really think that this is going to be an election that is going to be mostly about policy. And, Joe Biden last night said that he truly feels that the country is at an inflection point, and the next administration is going to set up the course of this nation for the next 40 years. I believe that too. So I think that really right now the American people are saying, hey, wait a second, we had 4 years of Trump, we've had 4 years of Biden Harris, and that is a very rare opportunity for voters to have the track record of both candidates before them. And I think that they're going to say, aside from all the Trump tweets and all that kind of stuff, the bottom line is I was better off under Trump. And that's why I think this is really just going to boil down to, Reagan said, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And the answer to that is just very simple.
Yeah, no kidding. It's kind of interesting. It's like harder for her to take credit for the things that Biden was taking credit for, but it's also harder for her to distance from the bad stuff because she was also part of the administration. She almost gets like worst of both worlds. But
right, I mean, what is she going to take credit for? The wonderful economy that is way better than it was under Trump? I mean, that's false. Everybody knows it. Doesn't matter what the media tells you. People feel it. They know how much they're paying at the grocery store as they go every week or more often than that. They know that it costs 5 times, 6 times as much to get enough milk for their kids than it did just 4 years ago. I mean, you can't, no amount of media gaslighting is going to make those kind of feelings and knowledge among the American voters go away. So I think I think Chris is actually right that maybe the 2016 election when Trump beat Hillary was kind of a personality-based election, to a larger extent, certainly than now. This will be a policy-based election. This will be voters looking at what the policies of the Biden administration have done to their own pocketbooks, to society, to our economy, to our political life, and then compare that to what they experienced for the 4 years previous to that. And I think no matter how much, I know the big messaging, and Joe Biden said it again last night, that democracy is on the ballot and that our democracy is over if Trump is elected president. Again, that's a harder sell because he was president for 4 years. He did not act as a dictator. Our democracy was not crushed and ruined, and it certainly wasn't saved just because Joe Biden narrowly won election in 2020. So I think as time goes on and people can focus on the new thing, which is now Kamala Harris, those kinds of messaging that Donald Trump poses some sort of existential threat to democracy itself, and as do all of his supporters, half this damn country pose a threat to democracy itself. I don't think that message is going to resonate with swing voters. I think it doesn't. And I think the polling, just as Rasmussen put out today, Trump leading 50 to 43. I think that messaging, which is being pounded and pounded by the media constantly, is not having the effect. And that's why they panicked. And that's why they got rid of Joe Biden in the first place.
Yeah, let's spend the rest of the time talking about the policies, because this is the thing. This is probably the most important thing about all of this. Like I said, in 2020, there was a concerted effort by a lot of the kind of mainstream Democrats to kind of push Joe Biden forward because he's seen as more moderate. He's likely to get more kind of middle of the road independent votes or whatever, come general election time. We need to force Bernie Sanders out because he's just kind of a radical leftist, and we got to get Joe Biden in there. And Kamala Harris is far more towards the Bernie Sanders side than the middle of the road, whatever moderate Joe Biden that we were, promised all those years ago. And, we already talked about that GovTrack thing. She was, deemed to be the most liberal of the sitting senators, which is a feat that in 2019, that's quite an accomplishment by Kamala Harris here. But so here's some of the things that she stands for, or that she's supported, over the years. The Green New Deal. So this was AOC's biggest thing, her claim to fame, the Green New Deal. I think most people listening to this are pretty aware of what the Green New Deal was. You might not be, though, because in addition to it trying to decarbonize the entire economy, within like 10 years, get rid of all fossil fuels, transition to just wind and solar, all of that within 10 years, that's what people remember. But there was all these other bits and pieces to it was it AOC's like Secretary of Staff or something?
It's a how do you change the entire economy thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a fixing the environment thing. It's a how to change the entire economy thing, because the Green New Deal also included massive new infrastructure plan, including a nationwide network of high-speed rails, universal basic income programs, because remember, those people that are unable and unwilling to work, they need money too, right? So universal basic income program, a government jobs guarantee, upgrading all existing buildings in the United States with, like renewable stuff or efficiency, insulation, that sort of stuff. The creation of public banks, rebuilding the electric grid, trillions of wind and solar development, and the transformation of the U.S. agriculture system. And, basically in the FAQ that was released alongside the original plan, remember they had all that talk about getting rid of cows because of their methane emissions and all of that. So Kamala Harris was one of 14 people that were like endorsing the Green New Deal. So that is something that she has to wear very proudly around her neck when she's running for president, that she was in favor of probably the most radical, most socialist aligned legislation that's been proposed probably in the last century. I don't know. I mean, Jim, I know they're probably going to talk about some of this in the Climate Realism show tomorrow at noon Central Time on all of these same stations. But I mean, that's a big one, right? Her support of the Green New Deal.
Well, yeah. In fact, Biden last night, as I watched that, he took credit. It's kind of his valedictory or his send-off speech, and where he could brag about all he's accomplished in just 3.5 years and all of that. And he mentioned specifically, we passed the largest climate change, fighting climate change bill in history. And as those words crossed my ears, I was like, but you didn't call it the Green New Deal or the Save the Planet Act of 2023. You called it the Inflation Reduction Act. So even what you consider your most grand accomplishment was sold and sold to the American people as a lie, that it had nothing to do with inflation whatsoever. It had nothing to do with us recovering from COVID and all of that other stuff. But yeah, Kamala Harris, I think, is a radical leftist. She's an out and proud radical leftist person. I mean, her record, as noted before, even while the GovTrack website has tried to make it disappear, like Stalin's people erasing people from photographs that are no longer convenient and that they sent to the gulag. There's still clips out there of Nora O'Donnell doing an interview with her on 60 Minutes, pointing out that GovTrack calls you the most liberal senator in the United States, and they had to talk about that. So that's being circulated. So, this attempt at newspeak and censorship is not going to work. Thank you, Elon Musk, for making sure that the American people can speak the truth and know the truth, including the truth about Kamala Harris's record. And I know we have a clip that we can play so that it doesn't go down the memory hole of just how radical she is just on the climate.
Yeah, I do. Yes, I want to mention that because maybe she's just supporting the Green New Deal because she wants universal health care or something like that. Like, nope, she is a climate alarmist to a crazy degree. So one of my favorite CNN specials was the 7-hour long climate change town hall event.
Yeah, we
where they
covered
had
that.
15 of the different candidates coming in that were all running in 2020, and they were asked a whole host of crazy questions. And one of them was somebody asking Kamala Harris about red meat consumption. So let's go ahead and play this clip. It's only like a minute and a half long or something like that, but it's kind of telling as to her views about climate change and what we need to do about it. So let's go ahead and play that if we have that one queued up.
But now more questions for Senator Kamala Harris. So let's go straight to an audience question now. Carolyn Corson is a lawyer from New York, Senator. She has a question about the impact of certain foods on the environment. Just to give some context here, the United Nations says that livestock cattle, contribute 14.5% of all human-produced greenhouse gases, which is an incredible number. Caroline, go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Climate change has been linked to agriculture and the overconsumption of red meat and also the overproduction of crops. Certain countries have changed their dietary guidelines to reduce the consumption of red meat in light of the impact of the climate change.
Yeah.
If elected, will you be supporting change in dietary guidelines? And then how will you plan on implementing the changes so that people effectively change their diets?
Yeah, I mean, and thank you, Carol, for your work and the question. I think of the point that you're raising in a broader context, which is that as a nation, we actually have to have a real priority at the highest level of government around what we eat and in terms of healthy eating, because we have a problem in America. And we can talk about all that we are now, the subject of this conversation. We can talk about the amount of sugar in everything. We could talk about soda. We could go on and on. So the answer is yes. But I'll also say this. The balance that we have to strike here, frankly, is about what government can and should do around creating incentives and then banning certain behaviors. I mean, just to be very honest with you, I love cheeseburgers from time to time, right? I mean, I just do. And I think that, but there has to be also what we do in terms of creating incentives that we will eat in a healthy way, that we will encourage moderation, and that we will be educated about the effect of our eating habits on our environment. And we have to do a much better job of that, and the government has to do a much better job of that.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, you love cheeseburgers. I mean, we all do. I don't know whether
from time to
try
time,
the
I don't
Beyond
eat them every
Burger,
day,
the Impossible
but
Burger, right? They try, but it's not quite the same. That's my personal opinion. But would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
The food pyramid. What people
yes,
to reduce red meat specifically.
Yes, I would. And I'll tell you,
So to me, this is a very telling clip because it's about changing the dietary guidelines, not based on any dietary needs. I mean, she talked about large sugary drinks. If I recall the little food pyramid, sugary things is that very small triangle at the very top of the food pyramid. She's talking about changing the dietary guidelines based specifically on their perceived impact on the climate. And then she says, and then we have to figure that out and then ban things accordingly. So that to me shows that she is willing to, make crazy concessions and changes in government mandates based on, the climate alarmist narrative. Chris, looks like you're going to say something.
Yeah. It shows her philosophy that the government knows best. And it is the antithesis of our philosophy, which is, no, actually people know best. So she wants the government to determine your dietary guidelines. Are you kidding me?
Right.
I mean, it's just this is so outside of what the government should be involved in right now. I can't even believe that she took that question seriously. But it is so symbolic of Kamala Harris is an elite from a coastal elite who thinks that she knows better, and she's also a total hypocrite, because I could name 20 times over the past couple of years in which she has, said something, but then done the opposite. Like she said, she's all for these, these electric ovens, but then photos emerge that she has a gas stovetop. So I mean, but that's just one of so many examples. So that's why I think that the American people don't trust her. They don't believe her. They don't think she honestly believes in this stuff. I bet that Kamala Harris does not even have a guiding, set of principles that encapsulates how she plans to govern. I think that she is the consummate politician and the worst, example of it by saying, where's the political winds blowing these days? Okay, there, I'll go down there. Because when she was Attorney General of California back in the day, she was actually pretty tough on crime and pretty tough on drug crime. But then when she realized, oh, wait a second, the people of California and the people across America don't really like that anymore, at least in the Democrat Party. Well, now I'm going to the total opposite. And now she's, defund the police and all that stuff. So this is just part and parcel for Kamala Harris, who is not a principled person who has deeply embedded views that she's thought about for, decades, like Donald Trump actually has. Donald Trump, since the 1980s, has been talking about globalization and whether that's good or bad for the Rust Belt and all this stuff. You can agree or disagree with him, but at least he has those heartfelt beliefs. And I think that people can see through this, that Kamala Harris is the just ultimate politician trying to say, what do the voters want me to say in this exact instance? Okay, I'll say that for this audience. Right. Donald Trump is the total opposite. He just says what he thinks, and people respect that.
I think she's an idiot.
Jim, there's a couple other things I want to get into, but comments on just her, beliefs when it comes to that clip, specifically climate change in general.
Well, I mean, I was struck by, no matter what crazy thing that person, that climate alarmist activist said, whatever came out of her mouth, Kamala Harris was going to be nodding her head the entire time.
Oh, yeah.
And she did say something nutty, like, we should, reduce the consumption of red meat to save the planet. And then Kamala Harris's immediate reaction is to agree with that. And then say specifically, we need to start thinking seriously about banning certain things, while also admitting that she likes a cheeseburger. The fact that Kamala Harris likes cheeseburgers is literally the only thing about her political life that has ever come out of her mouth that I can remotely relate to. Right. I like them a little bit more than just time to time, but that's my own vice. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I wonder if she has deeply held left-wing convictions, which I think she does. And I think there's also a part of her that is she's just a vessel for whatever nutty idea from the left that happens to to float down the stream. She will fish it out and put it in her basket. And just one last thing before we get to some of the other clips and other policies that are very radical that Kamala Harris has either implemented herself or heartily endorsed, is the fact, and I mentioned it before, she has a 92% turnover rate among her staff. The New York Times and the Washington Post have run stories sympathetic to Kamala Harris with the spin, basically, that her staff and people around her keep failing her, keep setting her up for failure instead of setting her up for success. But Kamala Harris also notoriously ignores the information in the briefing books that her staff prepares for her. So she will complain about looking like an idiot in a public appearance while trying to speak about policy, but it's her own fault because she doesn't read the briefing books that her staff prepares for her so that she could come across sounding like she knows what she's talking about. And so I don't think those kinds of habits are going to change just because she's running for president. And so we're going to see her nodding her head no matter what crazy left-wing words are coming out of the mouth of some town hall attendee. And she'll also just be endorsing all of the radical left policies that the people around her, and frankly, what is now the base of the Democrat Party, want.
Chris brought up some of her kind of historical record when she was in California or whatever. And I was going to skip over this because I thought there was a better segue earlier in the show. But just to make Andy, our producer, happy, I want to show this clip of her and Tulsi Gabbard during the debate, one of the debates for the primaries in 2020. This is the clip that effectively ended, or at least this was being hailed as the moment that effectively ended Kamala Harris's chances during that primary. So let's go ahead and play this clip of Tulsi just absolutely skewering Kamala Harris.
Congresswoman Gabbard, you took issue with Senator Harris confronting Vice President Biden at the last debate. You called it a, quote, false accusation that Joe Biden is a racist. What's your response?
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting Black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response.
As the elected Attorney General of California, I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work. And I am proud of making a decision to not just give fancy speeches or be in a legislative body and give speeches on the floor, but actually doing the work of being in the position to use the power that I had to reform a system that is badly in need of reform. That is why we created initiatives that were about reentering former offenders and getting them counseling. It is why, and because I know that criminal justice system is so broken, that I am an advocate for what we need to do to not only decriminalize, but legalize marijuana in the United States.
I want to bring Congresswoman Gabbard back in. Your response,
The bottom line is, Senator Harris, when you were in a position to make a difference and an impact in these people's lives, you did not. And worse yet, in the case of those who were on death row, innocent people, you actually blocked evidence from being revealed that would have freed them until you were forced to do so. There is no excuse for that. And the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
That could be a campaign ad for Donald Trump against Kamala Harris. Now, a little bit more of context of that, because this kind of occurred to me when I was watching that clip. Tulsi Gabbard, that was like one of her moments to shine during that. And she tried to clip that out and advertise that on social media and all of that through Google and everything. And Google denied it. They stopped her from being able to promote that. What? After a couple of days of appeal, Google finally came out and oh, you're right. We shouldn't have stopped you from being able to run that ad. It's actually fine or whatever. But
too late.
The momentum was gone, and the whole thing floundered or whatever.
That's how the system is rigged. That's how it works. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I was going to say, what I find most interesting about that clip is that Kamala Harris, was saying that she defended cash bail when she was a prosecutor. But then once that clip came forth and this whole ridiculous end cash bail, movement began, who was the first to jump on board of that? Kamala Harris. And who was the one who did it in Minneapolis? And there have been examples of people that she bailed out who went and committed murder after the fact.
Right.
So Kamala Harris is an utter hypocrite. And once again, that just goes back to my original contention that she just does whatever is politically feasible at the time. Right. Kamala Harris, I think, does not have a guiding set of principles, because she just only goes on, what's the trendy thing to do now? Right. I'll do that. Yeah. And I really think that her defund the police line is going to really bite her in the end, because the American people are really sick and tired of this violence that's upending our cities, and they're also going to attribute it to Kamala Harris, the border czar. And yes, she is and was the border czar, and the fact that she was the one who let this open border, catastrophe occur. And that is having a humongous disparate impact in urban areas across this country and in Chicago, Illinois, of all. There are people now who are being killed by illegal immigrants who should not be here, should never have come here, should be deported immediately. And what does she do? She defends them.
Yeah. You're not going to see Donald Trump or Republicans go after Kamala Harris from the left on crime, which is basically what Tulsi Gabbard did, by and large in that thing. I don't think most Republicans are going to be in support of no cash bail, because they can see what's happened in this country after the George Floyd riots, for which, by the way, Kamala Harris set up a bail fund to make sure that those rioters and criminals could get back out on the street. At least one of, and I'm sure more than that, committed murders after getting out of jail, thanks to Kamala Harris's get out of jail free card fund for the BLM and Antifa riots. But my memory of that, guys, and I haven't looked it up. That was the high watermark for Kamala Harris, because I believe before that debate, she was bragging that she was a quote unquote top tier candidate. Right. And Tulsi Gabbard said, okay, then I'll treat you like one and I'll go after you. I believe she pulled out of the race. That was before the Iowa caucuses. That might have been the last debate or second to last debate she ever did. And she must have pulled out of the race shortly after that, because I do remember it was just 4 years ago that the people were like, holy crap, Kamala Harris just got nuked. And she's finished. And I believe that was the end of pretty much the end of her campaign. And it was basically one question from a lower tier candidate like Tulsi Gabbard, who had the courage to tell the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in addition to the Green New Deal, which had a universal health care provision in it, Senator Kamala Harris also promoted her own, or proposed her own, Medicare for All plan that would have basically everybody from birth put into this plan, and some other different like carve out interesting things. Justin Haskins wrote an article. I'm not sure if it's published yet, but he talks all about her Medicare for All plan that she proposed just however many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. But in questioning about her plan, there were some interesting things that came out. We have another clip. Let's go ahead and play this one. This is from CNN of all places, asking her about her Medicare for All plan. If we have that clip ready, let's go ahead and play that, please.
The bill also says, quote, every individual who is a resident of the United States is entitled to benefits for health care services under this act. Not every individual who's a citizen, but every individual who's a resident. Mm-hmm. So you support giving universal health care, Medicare for all, to people who are in this country illegally?
Let me just be very clear about this. I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being from access to public safety, public education, or public health, period.
So the answer is yes. She was very clear. The answer was yes. Her universal health care plan would also include giving free health care to illegals. So this is what we're going from. We're going from the supposed down the middle of the road lunch pail Joe from Scranton, Pennsylvania, your dad's Democrat, to a radical leftist senator from California. So, Chris, final words on any of this, any other policy things that she stands for that I'm neglecting? We're 11 minutes late already, so feel free to take as much time as you want.
Well, I'm going to say this, and I know that it's a very taboo thing to say, but guess what? Kamala Harris is a fan of the Great Replacement Theory. And you know what that is? That is saying that we want to let in as many illegal immigrants into this country to change the voting demographic of this country. And that is what Kamala Harris is in favor of, so that they can create an underclass of extremely poor people who just depend on government and who get as much as they can from government, and they will continually to vote for the Democrat machine. I think that that is a recipe for disaster for the United States of America. That is why I oppose the Democrat platform in its current case. This is a far cry from the, Clinton Democrat that I, grew up. I wasn't a Democrat, but I grew up thinking, wow, okay, Bill Clinton, he wants to balance the budget. He wants to get people to working, not on welfare. That all made total sense. And, in 20 something, 30 something years, it's just become the complete opposite, where you've got one party, and I know I'm breaking this down and making this very black and white and, very, stark, but you've got one party who's saying, hi, American people, if you want to work hard, we're going to reduce your taxes. We're going to try to reduce prices and make your life as, enjoyable as possible. We're not going to, try to micromanage you on a daily basis. We're not going to tell you what kind of car to drive, what kind of gas stove to have, blah, 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 blah. And then you got another party that's saying, American people, we want to, control you to the hilt. We want to tell you what kind of car to drive, what kind of, air conditioning unit that you're going to have, what kind of just everything. Kamala Harris is in that boat. I'm not in that boat. So I hope that the American people overall, and American citizens, I should say, vote for the opposite of that. That's what I hope for. But then again, I'm also kind of worried that, we've had about 20 million illegal immigrants come into this country under the Biden-Harris administration. And I'm concerned that many of them are going to vote. And what is that going to do to the outcome of this election? I guess we'll find out.
We will. Jim, final thoughts What do you think? Are we jumping the gun thinking that she's going to be the candidate? Is she going to be the candidate? Wrap it up however way you want.
Yeah, I'll just say briefly, the idea that non-citizens are denied healthcare in the United States is false. You go to an emergency room in the United States and they will treat you. Period. That's the end of that. But as as Chris was talking, I actually wanted to look this up. The left and liberals and Democrats in this country, ever since Obama was elected president, wanted to institute a national health care service like the NHS in the United Kingdom. And if you are not a citizen of Great Britain, guess what happens when you try to have access to health care? You are denied. Or if you want to, you can get that care. You will just have to pay 150% of what the going rate for any of those services happen to be. So when the UK is always held up by the left as kind of the example that the United States should follow. And then, Kamala Harris says that illegal immigrants, people who are not here legally, people who are not citizens of this country, everybody should get health care anyway. That is even more radical left and than what happens in the UK. So that is even putting aside the immigration stuff in the UK. But yeah, so we will be talking about this for as long as Kamala Harris is the candidate. We will take this podcast's time to examine the radical left-wing policies that she advocates for and that the mainstream media has not been reporting on. And in fact, you had mentioned this is the last thing I'll say, Andy, so you can go ahead and start the outro music. But you talked about the coverage that Kamala Harris has gotten since she was tapped as the candidate for the Democrat Party. There were 10 stories in the Washington Post about Kamala Harris on Monday. 3 of them were in the style section, all of them glowing, of course. And not a single of the other quote unquote news stories did any examination of what her legislative record is, what she has said on the record about policy. It was all glowing propaganda coverage. And so you're going to continue to see that in the corrupt legacy media. And you have to come to podcasts like this to get the truth.
That is absolutely right. Addressing one question I saw in the chat a while ago, asking about the price tag of the Green New Deal. There was a calculation done by the American Action Forum, I think it was, that put the price tag as high as $94 trillion, which that was pre-Bidenflation too. So it's probably closer to 120 trillion at this point.
Oh, that's a bargain.
But
hold
on. Let me just say something. So we have people in the comments saying that I was incorrect about you having to pay in the UK 150% if you're not a citizen. They say they don't check out on it anymore, and that anyone from anywhere is an international health service stuff. So. Okay, staying correct.
Fact check.
All
right, so before we sign off, I will say this is a high watermark of the amount of people that are watching us live across YouTube and Twitter and Rumble and X and all of that. So like I said before at the beginning of the podcast, we have been demonetized by YouTube. So if you want to support the show monetarily, you can by going to heartland.org/inthetank. Donate to the show directly. YouTube doesn't take a cut. It's the most efficient way to support the show. But I do want to thank everyone for tuning into this week. Join us every week for a new episode of the In the Tank podcast. If you like the show, like I said, you can support the show. Heartland.org/inthetank. You could also help the show out by just hitting that like button, sharing this content, subscribing if you haven't already, or just leaving a comment under the video. All those things help break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. If you'd like, you can follow us on X at In The Tank Pod, or you can send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to the show by emailing us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At J Lakely on X, at Heartland Inst on X, and always visit heartland.org.
Fantastic. Chris Talgo, what do you have to pitch today?
Well, I hope everybody goes to heartland.org and looks at these polls that we just conducted with Rasmussen Reports, because there's a bunch of them and they are very interesting. And I think they're going to be very telling of what's going to happen come November 5th.
Absolutely. And special thanks to Andy in the background doing our production work. But thank you all for tuning into this episode, and we will talk to you next week.
We did it. We did it, Joe.
He's a lion, dog-faced pony soldier.